In a dark corner of Islamic history lies a horrific secret that memory cannot erase. A brutal crime carried out in the holiest place on earth. It left behind a bloody scene engraved in the consciousness of the Ummah. While the incident of Juhayman al-Tabai, the man who claimed to be the Mahdi, shook the Islamic world when he stormed the sacred mosque armed with deadly weapons, the terrifying event was nothing but a faint echo of a far greater crime. A crime that took place nearly 1,000 years ago, when a gang of criminals stormed the sacred mosque, murdered pilgrims, and stole the black stone without the slightest pang of conscience. That gang was called the Qarmatians. So who were they? How did they emerge? And what were their beliefs that paralyzed armies before them? Why did they dare to defile the house of God and commit that massacre that shook the pillars of faith? To answer these questions, we must dive into one of the bloodiest episodes in Islamic history. After the martyrdom of Al-Husayn ibn Ali, may Allah be pleased with him, in the Battle of Karbala, a passionate movement emerged supporting al-Bayt and standing by their men against the Umayyad, and later the Abbasid authority. This fervent group of supporters believed that the Alawites were more deserving of the caliphate and the leadership of the believers. They were soon labeled as the Shura of al-Bayt. A number of the sons and grandsons of Ali ibn Abi Talib led the Alawite movement, and a sect emerged that believed in their imamate, claiming that the Prophet had appointed Ali ibn Abi Talib, may Allah be pleased with him, and his sons from Fatima, as successors to the caliphate. Over time, this sect divided into several branches, the most notable of which was the Twelvers, who believed that after Al-Husayn ibn Ali, may Allah be pleased with him, the imamate continues through a line of 12 specific imams by name and attributes, beginning with Al-Husayn, then Muhammad al-Baqir, Jafar al-Sadiq, Musa al-Kazim, Muhammad al-Jawad, Ali al-Hadi, al-Hasan al-Askari, and ending with Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Askari, the hidden imam whom they believe will return. From the womb of this group, the Ismailis emerged, who differed in their view of the imamate, believing that the rightful imam after Jafar al-Sadiq was not Musa al-Kazim, but rather his brother Ismail ibn Jafar. The Ismailis claim that Jafar al-Sadiq appointed Ismail as imam, but Ismail died before his father, which led to the line of imams continuing through the sons of Ismail instead of Musa al-Kazim and his descendants. From among the descendants of Ismail, Abdullah al-Mahdi emerged in North Africa and established the Fatimid state, which stretched from Morocco to Egypt, founding one of the most powerful states in Islamic history. On the other hand, the early Qarmatians, under their leader Hamdan al-Qarmat, worked side by side with the Ismailis, advocating their ideas and believing in them. The Ismaili movement followed a precise dawah, missionary strategy and an extremely complex, secretive hierarchical organization, to avoid exposure by the Abbasid authorities, who were strictly monitoring every Alawite movement suspected of armed rebellion. This secrecy led the Ismailis to adopt tight, covert methods to protect their movement and its goals. At first, the Qarmatians made the city of Wazit in Iraq their headquarters, where they found a suitable environment for their preaching to grow and spread. Most of Wazit's population were poor and oppressed, suffering under the injustices of Abbasid governors, making them quick to sympathize with the Qarmatian message and join their ranks. But Hamdan al-Qarmat saw the need to establish a dawah center closer to the city of Kufa, which at the time was the main hub for Shura movements since the days of the Umayyad state. He named this center Dar al-Hijra and made it a launching point for spreading his message and a hub to attract loyal believers. This secretive, well-organized movement relied on collecting money to strengthen its base. Hamdan imposed fixed taxes on his followers, which enabled him to recruit more supporters and spread his ideas. The Abbasid state succeeded in capturing some of al-Qarmat's followers, and considered them a serious threat to public security in Iraq due to the spread of their extremist ideas. Even the caliph himself sought to understand the beliefs and goals of this radical group. Interrogations revealed that the Qarmatians held tightly to their ideology and were deeply influenced by the ideology of the Zanj rebellion, a major uprising that broke out in the agricultural areas of southern Iraq, where African slaves had settled. They had been inspired by revolutionary preachers who urged them to demand their rights. That armed rebellion lasted for 15 years, and the Qarmatians took advantage of it to expand their dawah and attract thousands of followers to their cause. Some of their supporters even reached Baghdad to warn the caliph of the growing threat of this increasingly extremist movement. Al-Tabari narrates in his history that a group from Kufa went to Baghdad to warn about the Qarmatian danger. In a strongly worded statement, they said that the Qarmatians had created a new religion outside of Islam and intended to use the sword against the Ummah of Muhammad. However, the Abbasid authorities were not prepared to listen. In fact, it was proven that one of the governors in western Iraq at the time was benefiting financially from the Qarmatians, collecting 1 dinar per person annually, which led him to ignore all warnings about them. Hamdan al-Qarmat divided his mission and chose his brother-in-law, Abdin, to be the main operative. Abdin was the intellectual architect who fully shaped the Qarmatian ideology. He authored most of the sect's literature. As the mastermind behind the ideology and its organization, Abdin appointed 2 men to key regions to spread Qarmatian ideas. He appointed Zakraway ibn Maraway as the chief Qarmatian Da'i missionary in western Iraq, while Abu Sa'id al-Janabi operated in the southern Persian region. At the same time, Hamdan settled near Baghdad to stay closely informed about the developments coming from the capital and to follow updates regarding the Ismailis in Persia. Based on that news, Hamdan would plan to strengthen his movement and expand his influence. After the death of the Abbasid Caliph al-Mu'tadid in 289 AH, the Qarmatian activity expanded into the Levant and Iraq. At that time, Abu Sa'id al-Janabi, the Qarmatian missionary in southern Persia, was one of the most active and influential preachers. Al-Janabi effectively exploited Persian nationalism and successfully promoted the idea that God despises the Arabs for killing al-Husayn and favors the Persians for supporting the imams from the Prophet's family. These ideas quickly spread among the Persians. During this time, Abbasid authorities raided al-Janabi's headquarters and confiscated his money, but he miraculously managed to escape. Around then, Hamdan al-Qarmati summoned him to Iraq, which increased tensions between the Qarmatians and the Abbasid state. When Hamdan al-Qarmati and Abu Sa'id al-Janabi met for the first time in an area known as Kalozay near Baghdad, Hamdan noticed al-Janabi's intelligence, sharpness, and loyalty to the Qarmatian cause. He then directed him toward Bahrain, today's eastern Arabian peninsula from south of Basra to Oman. The Qarmatian movement had already spread among a large segment of Bedouins and displaced people fleeing the Zanj rebellion into the Arabian desert, creating a fertile ground for al-Janabi's mission. Abu Sa'id al-Janabi achieved tremendous success. He married the daughter of a prominent local man, which strengthened his power and social standing and helped spread the Qarmatian ideology among the local population. By 286 AH, al-Janabi controlled most of Bahrain, took over al-Qatif, and began using armed force to impose obedience on villages. He became an influential force in the region. Due to growing concerns over Qarmatian movements, the governor of Basra and surrounding areas urgently requested that the Abbasid government increase city defenses and build a stronger wall. The request was approved, and a large budget was allocated. The Abbasid Caliph responded quickly, convening a meeting with his top commanders and ordered a military unit, supported by volunteers from Basra in southern Iraq, under the command of Abbas ibn Umar al-Ganawi to confront Abu Sa'id al-Janabi and destroy his movement before it grew stronger. However, the Abbasid forces suffered a devastating defeat. Most of the troops were killed, and al-Ganawi himself was captured. Eventually, al-Janabi released him, but sent him back to the Caliph in Baghdad with a threatening message full of warnings. This defeat was one of the key reasons the Abbasids stopped launching military campaigns into eastern Arabia, effectively leaving its defense to its inhabitants. As the Qarmatian threat grew day by day, Abu Sa'id al-Janabi managed in 290 AH to besiege the area of Hajj, modern-day Qatar, and took full control of it. He violently subdued those who rejected his mission, using torture and executions. He destroyed the city and eventually abandoned it, moving instead to Al-Asa, where he founded a new Qarmatian capital. This period witnessed notable expansion and activity by the Qarmatians. They engaged in armed conflict with some Abbasid governors and initially succeeded in killing many state soldiers. However, the Abbasid state launched a strong counterattack, defeating the Qarmatians, killing many of their leaders, and capturing the rest, including a man known as Abu al-Fawaris. He was sentenced to death by Abbasid judges. Before his execution, Abu al-Fawaris vowed to return after 40 days, which sparked riots and unrest in Baghdad. Some historians describe the event in detail. People gathered daily under the execution scaffold, counting the days, arguing about whether Abu al-Fawaris would return as he had promised. When the 40 days passed, the crowds grew larger. Some claimed the body hanging was not actually Abu al-Fawaris, while others insisted he was truly dead. Rumors spread that the ruler had executed another man and hung his body in place of Abu al-Fawaris to avoid civil strife. Eventually, the chaos forced authorities to disperse the crowd. Qarmatian activity was not limited to Iraq and eastern Arabia. They also spread into the Syrian desert and the Levant, where they defeated the Abbasid governor of Syria, Taghlib al-Shayd, and nearly captured Damascus after a long siege. Eventually, they seized important cities by force, including Hama, Mirat al-Numan, Baalbek, and Salamiyah. In Salamiyah, the historical stronghold of the Ismaili Dawa mission, multiple accounts emerged regarding the lineage of Ubayd Allah al-Mahdi. Some claimed he was a descendant of Jafar al-Sadiq, while others viewed him as an impostor. In this historic Ismaili city, the Qarmatians expressed their rage and hatred toward the city's residents, revealing their brutality and violence just as they did in other Levantine cities. The historian Al-Tabari, a contemporary of that era, described the Qarmatian invasions of several towns and cities. They began in Salamiyah, then attacked cities such as Hama and Mirat al-Numan, shedding blood and looting wealth. Not even women and children were spared. They then moved on to Baalbek, where they killed most of the population, leaving only a few survivors. After that, they returned to Salamiyah. When they arrived, the townspeople attempted to resist but eventually surrendered after being granted safety. However, once the Qarmatians entered the city, they began massacring the Hashemites and the rest of the population, killing even animals and children in Quran schools. They then left for nearby villages, continuing to kill, capture, and burn anyone they encountered. According to the historian Ibn al-Jawzi and his contemporaries, the second Qarmatian leader, Abu Tahir al-Janabi, entered the city of Kufa multiple times but deliberately avoided visiting the grave of Imam Ali, may God be pleased with him, and did not honor the grave of al-Husayn, as many Shiites did. Though the Qarmatians claimed that the Mahdi was the awaited savior, they used this belief to manipulate and mislead people away from true Islam. Because of the Qarmatians' dangerous ideology and their teachings contradicting Islam, the scholar Ibn al-Jawzi wrote his famous treatise The Qarmatians, in which he focused on what he called their outward doctrine of Shiite rejectionism but inner disbelief. He stated that the Qarmatians tried to limit knowledge to the sayings of the infallible Imam, thereby preventing people from using reason to understand truth, and planting doubt as the foundation of their movement. He also asserted that their real aim was to criticize and dismantle religious laws. It was confirmed that they believed in two ancient deities, denied the Day of Judgment, permitted what was forbidden, and made the destruction of Islamic law a central goal of their movement. While the Qarmatians were causing chaos in Iraq, the center of the Abbasid Caliphate, the Levant and Eastern Arabia, committing horrendous crimes of murder, rape, and mass slaughter, they successfully repelled numerous military campaigns, even those led by the most prominent Abbasid generals. By the beginning of the 4th century AH, the Qarmatian ideology, beliefs, and aggressive strategies against Muslims had grown to terrifying new levels. Just before the Fatimids moved into Egypt in 300 AH, a secret alliance began to form between the Qarmatians and the Fatimid state, and their relationship strengthened further after Abu Tahir ibn Abu Sa'id al-Janabi assumed leadership of the Qarmatians. Despite the fact that the Fatimids and the Qarmatians differed in some religious beliefs, their shared hostility toward the Abbasid Caliphate was the main reason behind the formation of this secret alliance. And the goal of this alliance was to weaken the reputation of the Abbasids and portray them as a defeated power in the Islamic world, especially in sacred places such as Mecca and the pilgrimage route. Through this, the Qarmatians and Fatimids aimed to destabilize the Abbasid state and present it to the Islamic world as incapable of protecting the holiest sanctuaries. In the year 312 AH, the Qarmatians launched massive attacks on caravans of pilgrims and Umrah travelers. 1,000 men and 800 horsemen set out from Bahrain and targeted a large caravan of pilgrims. They killed 200,000 men and 500 women and took the rest as prisoners to Hajj. They also seized spoils estimated at more than 1 million gold dinars. One of the greatest insults the Qarmatians directed at the Abbasids was the removal of the Abbasid Caliphate's banner and replacing it with the Qarmatian flag, an attempt to depict the Abbasids as unable to protect the pilgrims of the sacred house of Allah. In a bid to strengthen their influence and challenge the Abbasid Caliphate, Abu Tahir al-Janabi sent a letter to the Abbasid Caliph al-Muqtadir Billah, in which he demanded that the Abbasid state relinquish control over Basra and Awaz in favor of the Qarmatians. And this demand wasn't merely a desire to control strategic locations. Its goal was also to prevent the Abbasid Caliphate from freely managing the affairs of Sunni Muslims and controlling their wealth and lives. That letter represented a major insult to the Abbasid Caliphate and to the religious and political symbols of the state. Yet despite that, the Qarmatian leader received no response from the Abbasid state to his challenge. At that time, public opinion in Baghdad began to express outrage toward the state's vizier, who was mockingly nicknamed the Great Qarmatian. This nickname was used sarcastically due to his failure to confront the Qarmatian threat. As a result of this public anger, the Abbasids decided to take decisive action. They prepared a massive army under the command of the brave warrior Mu'izz al-Turki, and this army first headed toward Kufa to strengthen control over it, then moved to the city of Wazit. The army's goal was to regain control of Basra, Kufa, and Baghdad, cities that were under threat from the Qarmatians. Through this action, the Abbasids tried to respond to the major challenge posed by the Qarmatians and to restore their influence over those sensitive regions. The Qarmatian attacks on the outskirts of Mecca and the pilgrimage routes from Iraq, the Levant, and elsewhere continued. This had a negative impact on the number of pilgrims coming to Hajj and Umrah. Year after year, the number of pilgrims began to decrease, and the image of the Abbasid Caliphate continued to collapse in the eyes of the people. Then in the year 317 AH, many scholars issued fatwas, religious rulings, declaring the pilgrimage invalid, in order to protect people's lives and honor. Then came the great calamity that same year. Abu Tahir al-Qarmati, the leader of the Qarmatians, decided to invade Mecca itself and do with it as he pleased. On the outskirts of Mecca, the city's governor and several of its dignitaries came out to meet al-Qarmati and his army, asking them to leave the holy city peacefully. But al-Qarmati struck them with a sword and killed them all. He then rode his horse straight to the Masjid al-Haram, the sacred mosque, and entered it with his soldiers. In the midst of human chaos, during the Hajj season, the pilgrims, men, worshippers, elders and women, clung to the curtains of the holy Kaaba. But the savage soldiers of Abu Tahir al-Qarmati slaughtered and crushed everything in their path with brutality. In addition to that, looting spread among the Qarmatian soldiers, and they killed people everywhere, inside the sanctuary, in the streets, and the alleys of Mecca, until the city was filled with corpses. Al-Qarmati ordered his followers to bury the dead in the courtyard of the mosque and to throw the rest into the Zamzam well. But it did not stop there. Abu Tahir al-Qarmati considered the holy Kaaba and the sacred house, and the ritual of circumambulation, tawaf, to be acts of idol worship. He brutally killed anyone who followed the rituals of the house of Allah. Then one of his followers climbed onto the roof of the Kaaba to remove the mizab, golden water spout, then tore off its covering, its curtain, and ripped off its door, taking it with him. Finally, Abu Tahir al-Qarmati decided to take the black stone and rip it from its place before leaving. The black stone remained in the hands of the Qarmatians for over 20 years, during which they reached the peak of their power. They annexed the lands of Oman and repeatedly attacked Kufa and Basra, causing humiliating defeats for the Abbasids. One of the greatest insults in Islamic history. The Abbasid Caliphate was unable to do anything in the face of the Qarmatians' brutality and barbarism. They were forced to make peace with them in exchange for paying an enormous annual ransom of 12,000 gold dinars. In the year 339 AH, after difficult negotiations and the payment of massive sums of money, the Abbasids finally retrieved the black stone and returned it to its place once again. Eventually, the Qarmatians' influence declined due to internal collapse and the migration of many of them to Iran. In the mid-5th century AH, Al-Yuni and some Arab tribes loyal to the Abbasids and the Seljuks succeeded in defeating the Qarmatians and expelling them from the regions of Al-Asa and Bahrain. That marked the end of nearly 2 centuries during which people witnessed the most horrific crimes and massacres ever committed in the name of extremist ideologies during the Islamic Middle Ages. In conclusion, the history of the Qarmatians is a forgotten chapter in Islamic history, where the darkest forms of corruption and violence were embodied. After they left behind destruction and looting in the sacred Kaaba and Mecca, Islam was finally able to regain its strength and dignity after years of decline and humiliation, at the hands of a faction that cannot be connected to true Islam. And with that, we reach the end of this discussion about the greatest mafia the Islamic world has ever known. If you like this video, don't forget to support us by liking, subscribing to the channel, and activating the notification bell so you never miss our content. Your support means the world to us, and helps us bring more meaningful stories your way. Thank you.